Thank you everybody for coming today to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Speaker Series. And we are excited to have two speakers here today. And to introduce them, we have Ryan Perroy and Kevin Sullivan. And Ryan is professor and chair in the Department of Geography and Environmental Science at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and the director of the UH Spatial Data Analysis and Visualization Research Lab. He completed his graduate studies in geography at the University of California at Santa Barbara and has an undergraduate degree in physics from the College of William and Mary in Virginia, where he was a captain of the badminton team. And prior to joining the faculty at UH Hilo, he was an assistant professor in the Department of Geography and Earth Science at the University of Wisconsin-La Croix. And joining Ryan, we also have Kevin Sullivan, who has been with the County of Hawaii Planning Department's long-range division since February of 2017, and has been managing the county's coastal setbacks and riparian buffer initiative since 2020. A native Floridian, he received his bachelor's in environmental science and biology from Stetson University in 2002, and his master's in public administration from FGCU in 2012, with a concentration in public leadership and management. Kevin has been an AICP certified planner since 2012 and has almost 20 years of planning experience in small town, regional, and county level organizations working on a wide range of projects. And his passions include geospatial problem solving, growth management strategies, environmental, coastal, and comprehensive planning. And we're very excited to have you both today.
Great, thank you, Lauren. I'm going to share slides and then let Kevin go ahead and he can kick things off for us. So if you all can see that, okay, then I will go on to the next one here and then take it away, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Thank you all for joining us. To sort of start this off, I just wanted to talk about present this slide, which is representative of the county's sort of recent and current coastal zone management initiatives, many related to sea level rise and climate change. The ones that we will focus on today are pretty much the top half. The USGS PICASC initiative and the NOAA CZM phase 1, and maybe some phase 4 and 5. And then if we have time at the end to the phase 2 work, which is some policy related shoreline setback work. The last three are also some coastal zone management related initiatives with other partners. But all of this together really helps our county and our island move more towards integrated coastal zone management and having a comprehensive and holistic look at how our coasts are changing, I think. As some of you may or may not know, the other neighbor islands have a sort of a different level of data and analysis than our island does in some respects. And so what Ryan and myself and all of these partners have been working towards is improving our baseline, improving our knowledge, improving our science so that we can improve policy moving forward. So this has become a phased endeavor over the years to one degree or another, and largely born out of existing partnerships with UH Hilo and Ryan's lab, also with Pacific Island Climate Adaptation Science Center, which we have Scott Larson on the phone. I want to wave to Scott. He was pivotal early on in getting some of these initiatives rolling. And my supervisor, Bethany Morrison, with the Managers Climate Corps as well. As you can probably imagine, some of the challenge has been integrating and synthesizing a lot of these initiatives, looking for co-benefits and avoiding duplication of benefits, because these are coming from a lot of different funding sources, the data and the products. So again, today I think we'll be talking about, and I'm about to hand it over to Ryan. We'll be talking about the work that's sort of either been completed or is getting completed, right? Is underway now. And Ryan's work is foundational. The data and the science he's collecting for these pursuits is really what we needed to start looking at our coasts in detail. And a lot of what he has done is novel and unprecedented for the island. And then if we got time, I'll go over some of the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program work that another of our contractors, Tetra Tech, is working on with us. Or we can talk to Lauren about another speaker series to gather to address some of these other ones. But with that, I'm honored to hand it over to Ryan, and thank you all for being here and listening.
Right on. Thanks very much, Kevin.
Oh yeah, sorry. This is
another one here.
Yeah, this is sort of with all the lists, this is sort of an easy way I thought to sort of summarize what those initiatives are getting at. Those were the names of the actual either grants or approved project titles, which, as we know, can get a little intricate sometimes. But this is, in my mind, sort of how it breaks down. So yeah, thanks, Ryan. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Right on. Well, again, aloha, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of what we've been doing. I was telling Lauren earlier, this has been a great excuse for me to kind of take a step back and sort of, play around with the data. We're kind of in the processing, in the nuts and bolts right now, but this has been a good chance for me to kind of, take another larger scale view about what we're doing. Lots of folks to acknowledge on here. This is definitely a big team effort. Kevin outlined a number of the sort of larger goals and phases. For what I'll be speaking about, it's really trying to get at a shoreline inventory of the entire coastline of Hawaii Island, and doing that with high resolution imagery taken both at nadir, which is basically downward looking perspective, and then oblique at an angle, particularly where we're looking at cliffs, to try to basically characterize the shoreline in a way that hasn't quite been done before, at least certainly not at this scale. And we're primarily doing that via sort of a technique called photogrammetry, also known as structure from motion. And we're basically taking photographs, thousands and thousands of photographs, and we're using some image processing techniques to kind of stitch those together into large individual photographs that are basically encompass all those individual small ones, and derived three-dimensional data sets from those individual photos. And I'll show a number of examples of these. And once we have those data sets and we have other data sets we can pull in, we can start to get at things like, understanding how our shorelines are changing, and what sea level rise inundation may look like in the future. And so the idea of this is to really supplement and complement other data sets and efforts. As Kevin mentioned, there's a number of different things going on, and really to help hopefully inform policy and truly to try to benefit our local coastal communities. And this photo, this is sort of the poster child for this. This is you may know this house. This is here around Hilo, just by Honolulu. This is a house that is falling into the ocean. It was maybe built a little bit too close to the cliffside. So, thinking about how we can use a better understanding of the science of our coastlines to, stop this kind of thing from happening in the future is, I think, a good idea. This is a slide from a talk I gave earlier this year, and where I sort of introduced the project, and I said, oh, we've done some work on Kona side and then on this Honolulu survey, and we got more than 90% of the island to go. And this is from a talk I gave back in February. And I'm happy to report that I've fully mapped the island at this point. So what you're seeing here is a graphic, and if anyone is red-green colorblind, my sincere apologies. I'm sorry if that is the case. But basically, what you see here are the entire shoreline, and there's different, we call them sort of priority levels, but it's sort of levels of data products that we're going to generate, and the whole thing has been mapped. And so there'll be imagery produced of the entire shoreline, as well as digital surface models. But the more highly accurate three-dimensional models and our best attempt to get at bare earth models will come in these areas where they're red, these sort of red sections. And so I'm going to take you on a bit of a tour of the island, looking at a number of these sites, and we're going to start in Kohala, because I'm talking to the South Kohala good folks. But we're going to look at some other locations as well, to give you a sense about what we've been able to produce and how that compares to some existing data, including some brand new data that was just released from a LiDAR project. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we go about this, and again, share some different examples. Our basic workflow is we define the different study areas. And so, those red segments, for example, these are areas that we want to do the best job we can in. We want to do a good job everywhere, but there's limited time and money, so we have to sort of prioritize. In order to get the most highly accurate data we can, we need to put in, they're called ground control points. They are identifiable places in the landscape that we can use differential GPS equipment to get at very, very highly accurate three-dimensional coordinates for those points. And then we can incorporate that into our image processing to basically generate these three-dimensional models, which I'll share, which we're, again, trying to lock in and get them to be as highly accurate as possible. But in order to do that, you have to go be out in the field, hike around, interact with folks, and collect that information. Then there's the flight operations, and then all the image processing, and then eventually we generate these different products. Again, with the idea of analyzing things that are changing over time and other uses. We use this. We primarily use a helicopter for doing this. This is a photograph of Hawaii volcano copters. David Okita and Roberto Rodriguez from my lab, with the imaging rig, which is at the belly of the helicopter, that we've developed for this purpose. Actually, we developed it for rapid Ohia depth work, but we modified it since to try to do a good job for coastal mapping. And so we've got cameras which are straight down, but also oblique, and depending on the sheerness of the cliffs and how big they are, that oblique angle can get a little bit larger. And this was developed originally with Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and David Okita, but also R&R Welding and Machining here in Hilo. Again, we've done this, a lot of mapping for rapid Ohia death and invasive species in other places, but we're primarily doing this for the shoreline. So this is a video, hopefully you guys can see this, is going to play on a loop, and this just gives you a sense about what it's like when we're in the helicopter doing the mapping. And I'll pause it here in just a second. I'll get to a good spot. Pause it. So can you see my cursor? Can you see the little hand here? Okay, so what in the background here, this is a kind of a heads-up display, so the pilot can see exactly what the camera is seeing, so he can know he's online or such. And then in this tablet that I'm holding right here, let me advance it a little bit, if this will work. There are these tracks that we're trying to follow. And so in the high priority areas, we try to follow the area and map it with 4 different passes of overlapping photographs. And that's really the trick to making these three-dimensional models. You want a lot of overlapping photographs. So in the high priority areas, we do multiple flight passes. In the lower priority areas, we might just do 2 passes. We tried to get away with 1, but that didn't really work too well. So at least 2 passes, and then up to 4, in some cases a little bit more. And so I'd like to maybe start with this location here, which is the longest high priority section on the island. So this is from, you know, Kauai High down to sort of Waikoloa area. It's about 25 kilometers or so, I believe. And these white triangles are these ground control points that we surveyed in with our equipment. And I think there's more than 100 in this stretch. And so this is, you know, we have some big field days. This is folks from my lab and a number of Hilo students. And I believe this is actually in Puako. Before we go out and do the surveying work, we like to communicate with the folks there to give everybody a heads up and kind of let them know. And so it often starts with an email from me saying, you know, aloha, or, you know, explaining what we're about to do, and just trying to get buy-in from the citizen groups and, you know, land managers at the different resorts and such, and explain the equipment that we'll use, and give them a sense about, you know, where we'd like to be and any access issues and such. And that's actually worked out really nicely. And it's generally, you know, we don't like to surprise people, particularly if we're walking around a whole bunch. So we want to give, you know, folks as much, you know, advanced warning and information about that as we can. And people have been really receptive and interested in the project. And then we go out and we do the surveying work. And so this is anywhere there's sort of high contrast, right? So, you know, these corners at these sort of no parking zones, that's a good spot. Corner of you know, this is from one of the resorts. All the resort people were, you know, what are you guys doing? But there was not a tennis game going on, so we're able to slide in there. And then also natural features that, again, we want them to be flat and then high contrast, so they show up in the photographs. And so, you know, I've learned more about this island than I knew starting this project, mapping the whole thing and walking around. I certainly have gotten my miles in. It's been amazing. It's been a fantastic experience. And sometimes we also put down temporary markers, and wherever we can, we try to connect into existing benchmarks that are already have survey information associated with them. So we're always happy when we come across these or find them when we're looking for them. We take all the photos and we run it through our big computers, and we generate products, which I'll share in just a second. But this is from that same stretch, segment 67. And so the imagery we produced had about less than 2-inch resolution per pixel. And we had, you know, almost 4,500 photos that were involved in this, and 111 ground control points. And so, and all these photos get put together into this program, and we make products like this. So this is this ortho mosaic of this area. These are the blue showing the flight paths. And then these crosses, these X's, are showing all the different ground control points that we basically entered into the computer to make sure it knew exactly where these points should be associated with. And lots of ground control points, just, you know, and basically entering all this in and working through the computer. And I know this is maybe not that interesting, but this is just, you know, time for the different products to get generated. So this is for the point cloud that gets generated. My big computers took about 12 hours. And I don't know if you can see here, but at the bottom here, it says average density per cubic meter, actually. And that says that we've got about 24, a little bit more than 24 points in a cube meter area. And that's important because that allows us to have very detailed, sort of high resolution data sets that we can work with. And we generate these other things, and, you know, the computer ran for almost 5 days to make an ortho mosaic. And so you hope the power doesn't cut out, because that would be terrible, and it happens on occasion. But luckily, this one made it through. And so, and at the end, we get things like this. So this is, hopefully it's going to work. This is a little movie. And we're going to zoom in at the Pu'ukohola Heiau at the National Historic Site, just south of Kauai High. Some of you all may know this very well. And I'm going to play some videos from other locations as well, but this will kind of give you a sense about, you know, what this looks like. So this is going to be the ortho mosaic. So there's one really big, massive photo that has been created out of all the little photos. that's been draped over what's known as a sort of a topographic data set, or a digital surface model. And so we're going to zoom in on the Hilo here, and it's going to sort of rotate around, and you'll get a sense about, you know, the level of detail that we're getting from the integration of these different data sets. And so this is allowing us to get a very highly accurate three-dimensional, you know, representation of our coastline and features that are on our coastline. And I thought this was just a really nice one to maybe start with as we sort of go through this little tour. I'm going to zoom in on some, you know, particularly I think interesting coastal sites in just a second, but I thought this was a, you know, sort of a nice start to get a sense about what we're going to be looking at. So hopefully what I've, you know, shared with so far is making sense. You're more than welcome to stop me. But we're going to jump up to the tip up in Hawi, Upolu area, and this is by the airstrip. So here's part of the airstrip right here, and this is a relatively small section, but there's more interesting sort of you know, coastline. There's a little bit more topography here than where we were just looking. So again, I'm going to zoom in here. This is a video I made, and you'll get a sense about what this looks like and the level of detail that we're picking up here. So this guy's going to sort of rotate around. Focus on the land. The land is not changing. When we fly, the waves are crashing, and so the water surface is, you know, it's moving, and that causes some havoc for our image processing. And so the water looks a little wild, but we sort of are gonna, you know, carve that out because we're not interested in the water surface. And when we fly, we try to fly at low tide, and we try to fly when lighting conditions are good to illuminate the areas that we're interested in. And those two things don't always match up with the pilot schedule, so we do the best we can. But that's our attempt to you know, work that out. This is another section. This is an interesting sort of, you know, stair step point that found in this area. And you can see the exposure of the bedrock down here, and then we got the soils layer up above with a little bit of grass. And over time, there's a lot of erosion control efforts up in this area. I don't know if anyone on this call is associated with them, but I saw erosion fabric, and people are doing things up here because there definitely is some erosion problems in this area that are ongoing and active. And you know, the road is definitely eating down into the ground and so on. This is one last sort of, you know, 3D drape in this area. This is a tree, this sort of bump over here, but I wanted to focus on this little cliff right here. I thought this would be an interesting one to take a look at. This is a photograph that I took during our ground control point work to give you a sense about that same area. Here's this little swale, right? This little swale up here, and then down into this interesting. And in sort of the geospatial software we use, the GIS, you can actually drape sort of a topographic profile line on here. And as such, you can reveal what this would look like in sort of in profile view. And so this is basically our data set. And what you're seeing here is sort of the side view of what that looks like, right? So here's the top of the cliff, here's the top, and then we get to the edge here, and here's the edge, and then we go down and we get this sort of nice representation of what this looks like. And so this is really helpful because this now provides, as of 2022, with the date that this was collected, we now know what this place, you know, looks like. And so if we were to, you know, fly it in 5 years again, or do something else, hopefully that would be the idea. We could compare it and see, you know, if things have changed. Now, there's been earlier work done using not photographs and structure from motion, this idea about, you know, generating three-dimensional models from just photographs, but using another technology called LiDAR. And some of you all may have heard of this, but LiDAR is basically sending out laser pulses into the landscape. They bounce off the surface, and then based on the amount of time it takes to come back, you can get a three-dimensional model that way. It's different than our process in that it's an active form of sort of remote sensing. And the biggest benefit of that is you can kind of see through vegetation in a way that our imagery can't. We get stopped at the tops of trees. Just recently, a data set was released, and this is again just sort of comparing, you know, these bumps and ridges you see in the profile here against what we're getting in our profile here. Just recently, a data set was released from one of these LiDAR flights. And this is what that profile looks like for this same area. So it's the exact same line, but this is another sort of data set that has come out. And they're basically showing, you know, the overall shape is the same, right? The overall shape is the same. We're just having a little bit more detail in our product based on sort of our approach. But again, this is in a good situation for us because there's not a lot of vegetation around, right? So I just wanted to sort of, you know, share that. And let's now jump down south if we can. So we're going to jump all the way down to Miloli'i, a fantastic community down there. We were really welcomed and really enjoyed our time with those folks down there. I'm not going to show imagery from the village proper. I want to talk to those folks a little bit, but I am going to show some from the sort of the development up north. And I think there's again, sort of an interesting, you know, geomorphic feature up here. And then there's some interesting things that folks are doing in this part of the island. I don't know, I haven't shared this with Kevin. I don't want to put him on the hot seat, but I'd be curious his thoughts about what folks are doing in this area. But again, you can see, you know, we've got, you know, pretty good, interesting place here. Again, this is, you know, bare soil, bare rocks, not a lot of vegetation to get in the way of what we're trying to do for our three-dimensional models here with our approach. And again, really interesting, beautiful part of the island. And you can see these folks, they know we're coming, but they, you know, wrote some things in shells on the ground and a little message here, and we were able to pick that up. This is the house that I was sort of interested in as I was kind of, you know, poking around, but, you know, it looks like there's been a fair amount of, you know, construction. I believe this is some kind of a concrete, you know, fence that folks have put right on the edge of the poly there. And, you know, this is an interesting, I don't exactly know, you know, what that means or what needed to happen for that to take place, but I don't see that too often in a lot of places. So that was sort of caught my eye as I was, you know, processing some of the images in this area. And then we can keep on shooting over Papa'aloa, and now we're in you know, more densely vegetated area of the island, right? And so what you're seeing here is a screenshot from another program we use. This one's called Global Mapper, but this is where we work with the point cloud that gets generated. And so you're not looking at an image here, you're actually looking at an assortment of individual points, three-dimensional points. And this line here, this yellow line here, is going to basically highlight just a strip of these points that you'll see in the next slide. And so this is the water down here, and then we've got the shoreline and sort of a cliff, and then up to the flats where we've got, you know, some houses and trees and other things here. So on the next slide, what you're going to see is this sort of, again, kind of like a two-dimensional profile of this, but the points themselves. And so that's what this looks like. So these are individual points that have three-dimensional coordinates associated with them. And this is just from that strip that we are looking at in here, right? Just this sort of highlighted strip in sort of the red there. And so a big effort that my lab is working on right now is to take these point clouds and to try to identify just those points which are corresponding to the ground. And then basically all the other points we don't necessarily care about because we're interested in what's known as bare earth models. And those can be used for, again, looking at changes in the land over time and such. And so this is an area where we're actually, you know, we've got a lot of points to work with. And so it's looking pretty good. This is just another small transect, just a little bit further down. And again, it's pretty straightforward to identify the ground points versus the other points. If we move even a little bit further south down the coast, and now we're in a very densely vegetated area, and we're highlighting this sort of, you know, strip right here, this area right here. This is what that looks like. And this is very challenging, right? Because basically all of this, all we see is the tops of the trees. So what we have is an absence of information about the ground. So this is a situation where the approach that we're using, this sort of, you know, photograph-based approach, this is definitely where its weaknesses come through because we don't have any information about the ground in this area. right? Whereas the LiDAR data set should, hopefully, be able to, give a better sense about the ground surface beneath vegetation canopy. Where the sparse vegetation, no problem, we got that. But where it's dense vegetation, this is an issue for us. This is an actual photograph. So I've been showing a lot of three-dimensional models and such, but this is a simple photograph. And I've showed this in previous presentations, but it always just like blows my mind. So these folks, this poor pool is right on the edge here. You can even see the corner of the pool, the concrete, right? And it's being undercut, and there's got their drainage pipes to try to move the water through, but it's just not a good situation for these folks on the coastline over here. And the last site I wanted to highlight is, again, kind of wrapped around the island here in outside of Hilo, Honolulu, which is a very is where that house was in the first photo I showed, and it's a very well-known surf spot, at least over here on east side. And in this one, I wanted to highlight the comparison of these three different data sets. So there have been these LiDAR data acquisition missions. There's in 2013. There's another one that sort of spanned 2018 to 2020. I'm just going to call it 2020 here. And then our data set, which in this area we acquired in 2021. And so I wanted to sort of, just highlight, what these three different data sets look like in one particular section, and just, talk about the consequences of that just a little bit. So this first one, this is the 2013 LiDAR data set. And same kind of deal, right? We've got, so here's Honolulu, is where people surf and have a great time. And this is moving a little bit south towards Hilo. And there's this sort of, little peninsula that juts out. And again, this blue line is representing a topographic, transect. And so this blue dot here is basically this point over here. And then this blue dot down here is this guy down here, right? And so we can see gently sloping, and we get to the nose, and then it goes down, and there's a little bump here, and then it goes down to the shoreline. So that's from 2013, right? This is from 2020. So this is the 2020 LiDAR. And so, basically we see generally the same kind of thing. It sort of goes down, and then it comes down. But if I go back to that 2013, if you just sort of focus your eyes in this section, you're going to see some pretty dramatic difference, right? You're going to see some pretty significant change that occurred here. And one interpretation of this, if you take it at face value, is, oh, there's a ton of coastal cliff collapse, and we lost all this material, right? And so basically, what had been here is sort of eroded and retreated back, and now it looks like this, right? And we could measure how much we've lost and do that kind of a thing. Well, if we bring in the next data set, the 2021 data set, well, this is what it looks like again. Right. And so from a geomorphic perspective, that's very interesting. So that would suggest that I'll go back to the 2013. Here's the cliff, and then it went back, but then it came forward again. And that doesn't really happen in nature, right? So what this suggests is that there's some problems with these data sets, right? There's some problems with these data sets. And this is just a direct profile comparison of these data sets. So the 2013 is the blue. That's this one with this little hump here. And then the 2020 is this green guy, right? And then the 2021, which is from my lab, this is this orange guy. And so they don't match up that great, right? And I think it has to do with how these 2020 LiDAR data were processed. And hopefully they're working on this, and they're going to be able to, make a better product. I think they had a very aggressive algorithm for identifying ground points, and it was so aggressive that it actually took off the corner of the cliff here. But in terms of these goals that we want to have in the future to quantify change and map how things are changing, you can only do that if the signal of change is greater than the noise in your data, right? If the signal of the change is greater than the noise in your data, you can start to quantify and map these things. But if the noise in your data is so big and great, you're not going to be able to see these small changes, which and this is not insignificant what's going on here. So I guess part of this is, just a communication about, if we really want to understand how our shorelines are changing, and we want to use this technology to do that, we need to do a really good job on quality control and making sure that the data products that are getting generated are up to the task for us to see the changes that we want to see. And so I think that's basically I'll leave it at that. I know Kevin had some additional things he wanted to speak about potentially. Thank you for your time. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, here's my email, rperroy@hawaii.edu. Happy to have a discussion, if this raises any questions in your minds. And again, I can turn it over to Kevin if you like.
We can field questions right now as well. Depends on, at least give that opportunity because we have time. And if there's, Scott, you've got some questions?
Wow, fantastic, Ryan. That is a stunning series of 10 months in data analysis. Just that, I just had mainly a comment like, wow, from February to now, that is unreal, what you've accomplished. So it's done, right? No more georeferencing, no more sensing for the island evermore, right? Just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, the imagery collection is done, right? The image processing will never stop, right? I mean, because we are always seeing, things that could be improved or whatever else. But we're in a big hustle right now to get a number of products to Kevin by the end of the year. But we know that we're going to have to revise some things. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. It has been quite an intense.
I mean, I literally got chicken skin when I saw what you'd done. I mean, that is amazing. And I love the idea of, okay, there's sparse vegetation is well covered. And obviously you're going to have to, come to grips with the dense vegetation scenarios in years to come, technologically, et cetera. But considering you're talking about 7 centimeters of pixel size here, that is quite a foundation. And I wonder how much your teams, as you see into the future, how much you see your teams regularly interacting with communities as you have, which is so cool to see those emails you sent out to communities, because I think that's like a neat opportunity to bring in, for instance, social scientists to interview and bring in the community perspectives that you might, with surveys, et cetera, to sort of guide some of Kevin's work and how you can apply to it. I just wonder your thoughts on that, or if you've thought about that.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for the question, Scott. No, that's a super, I mean, this is being done to, for the benefit of our communities, and getting their sort of, thoughts and feedback is really important. So, for example, the Milali'i group, they asked that, we kind of hold off on showing any high resolution, images of some of their areas of concern, just because, there's some things going on there that they just want to sort of vet, or, at least get first chance to take a look at it, that kind of thing. So before things get released, we're definitely kind of, talking with, the groups that we initially made contact with in order to basically get permission to access the lands in the first place. To be honest, we were just in such sort of data processing sort of focus mode that I haven't sort of set any of that up. But I think as we get into the new year, I think there will be some good opportunities to do that, because again, a number of them invited us into their communities for us to do this work, and for the national park or local communities or whatever else, we also want to be able to, provide this information in a way that is helpful for them. And again, hear what they have to say, right? And because they know where the road floods, they know, right? They know a lot more than what we do, right? We just have these data sets that look good. So I think that that's it's right, but it's also, to be honest, it's also a piece that that without conscious intention can easily get slipped by. And I'm aware that that's a possibility, and I hope that I don't get swept up in other things and that gets sort of lost by the wayside. So that is my intention, and hopefully I can carry out with that too, right? But yeah, I'm sure Kevin has some other thoughts, but those are,
if I can jump in there, that's why I'm so honored by you and Bethany, the folks that Kevin mentioned initially, those sort of long-term relationships and what can develop. So I hope that it sounds like from what you're saying, it's not like, oh, we're done. There's going to be plenty of reasons to keep engaging community around the island into the future, even though you've got this really accurate data set for those vegetation-free zones, right? You're still going to be out there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we got a lot of projects, and I don't want to overstate the accuracy and quality of our data, right? So those you know, the estimated root mean square error for those data sets, those are from basically nice, flat, open areas that it's safe for people to go and get, you know, checkpoints and such. And where it gets really complicated and such, I can guarantee you that some of the errors are higher than what we were seeing, right? So I don't want to overstate that. I think the level of detail in our data sets, like, I'll stand behind that 100%. You can see all kinds of things, but the overall, you know, absolute accuracy, you know, it's not all less than 5 centimeters, like, no way, right? So I just want to be realistic about that. But yeah, your point is taken.
Awesome. No, I just congratulations. I'll let Kevin jump in, but man, I just see all kinds of opportunities, like you say, to formalize that reciprocal information exchange and build those relationships. So congratulations. That's awesome what your team has done.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I would say that this is, or at least when myself and Bethany Morrison, my supervisor at the county, initially were scoping this, and it was before COVID, where it sort of, the snowflake started rolling, and Ryan and Bethany and Scott have worked together in Honolulu and looking at our unique coastlines for several years before I came in 2017. But I think this really is a representation of scaling up, and really, I affectionately call this this whole endeavor shoreline pursuit, and I call it that because I grew up playing Trivial Pursuit as a kid, and when I had to wrap my head around how are we going to do this, I started to realize, with the help of the team, which was myself and Bethany and Scott and Ryan, and also Alex Roy with my department, and Eric Lash, who's with our IT department, who's a GIS specialist. We undertook some additional due diligence, and the way I started wrapping my head around this was sort of like a board game, like going around the island and asking the right questions and beginning to sort of fill up the board and the game piece. If you remember Trivial Pursuit, I see some head nods, not so many anyway. And like the priority mapping area that Ryan showed, you know, there wasn't enough money nor enough time to do sort of everything. So we've had to stay nimble. We've had to iterate. We've had to take some chances. We've had to, you know, learn as we go. But I do believe this is a long-term initiative. I'm a data guy. I realize the power for the community and for policy and for government of having this high resolution data. It's really the best we've ever had in the island. I don't think I'd be out on a limb saying that. And again, in comparison with the other neighbor islands, how their initiatives form up, it's imperative upon us to continue to collect and share this sort of data with the community. Ryan's still working, you know, with, as he stated, you know, we have additional phases underway now. We might even look towards some of those medium priority areas and see what we can do there. And then there's a whole other portion of this that we didn't necessarily cover that's got to do with actually delineating these 3D models and getting useful information out of them. So an example of that is, well, where's the top of cliff? Because as far as policy goes, state law requires us to measure from the certified shoreline, but we can also measure setbacks from the top of cliff. But we need to know, you know, well, where are those? So we found a USGS tool that sort of automates some of that, and we've been looking at that. Ryan has also been, as part of phase one, he helped us with some riparian work as well. So that's a whole other sort of side of this that needs money. And I see actually Kamu Plunkett, my old colleague, just hopped on, and hopefully he can help us with that one day too. And so it's a really exciting project. It continues to be. We currently will at least be working through the end of 2023 on finishing, on continuing to build these data products. And also into 2023 and maybe early 2024 is the policy side of taking this data and making it actionable in policy as the county updates its shoreline setbacks. We have a general plan still under review and development, and we're also looking or have a code audit underway. So there's a lot of irons in the fire, and my goal on this shoreline pursuit project is to be able to connect and synthesize with those initiatives as well. So yeah, it's exciting work. I think that, Scott, your point is totally salient about continuing to involve the community. The least of which would be the high resolution of the data. I mean, you can see in people's backyards, right? Sort of stuff. And that local knowledge is important because you can tell so much from a photo, but as Ryan pointed out, it's like the photo is not catching the rain flow, right? That's flooding a road or so forth and so on. It's not identifying all the time what those local impacts and issues really are. And thank you, I think, Ryan, for the Mililii aerial of the gentleman or family property owner, whomever, with the concrete wall. That is an interesting one that I took a note on. But yeah, I want to leave some room for questions if anybody's still got them. What I was going to share is what we are thinking about setbacks themselves, but it's nothing that can't wait. So look, are there any other questions from anybody? Yes, Tam.
I was just curious. I was curious about the riparian data and the work that you've done on that. And I don't know if anyone else has interest in seeing that, but gosh, I would love to see you do a similar presentation on the riparian areas.
Okay, we can do that. I can speak a little, and Ryan might be able to speak a little bit. So with the funds we had for phase one, we were really only able to look at in detail at Honolulu Street, and Ryan did some fabulous work there to the degree of even putting together what's called a topographical positional index, which helped delineate, like, this is a ridge, this is the bluff, this is the top. That's helpful. There are some hydrologic models. Some of his methods we've carried forward, and I've worked with our other vendor to sort of try to go island wide. There's data gaps. We don't have, as an example, we don't have flood zones on the east side of the island. So we used a U.S. Forest Service model. It's called the riparian buffer delineation model, and it takes into account soils data, wetlands data, land cover, elevation, and it models a 50-year flood. But again, we don't have any actual 50-year floods modeled, so it's sort of it's a best guess. But it was able to output a variable width buffer around our streams that come from the National Hydrography data set. So I'm still looking at those because they're not finished. It's the first time anybody's run that model in Hawaii. It's a national model, so of course there's always going to be opportunity for tweaking it locally with additional things, specifically with any flood data or flood models. But yeah, I'd say I'm neck deep in that on my side of things as far as what's going to happen with riparian protections and buffers. there are a few, interestingly, there are a few stretches along the Hamakua coast that are designated as state land use conservation, these fingers of protected riparian areas, and they're usually the larger streams. I think there's 6 to 8 of them. And in speaking with the state and looking through the Land Use Commission statements, staff reports and everything, they were approved to be conservation lands based on their intrinsic landscape value. And I asked them, well, what did you guys use to delineate the edge or the top of cliff? And they basically said, you know, something like a 20-degree slope or where the top of gulch was. So when I was able to compare Ryan's work with that, it lines up pretty darn close, which was satisfying to me. Because I think long-term, the riparian buffer discussion does get into conservation and protection of these areas. And there's been a lot of, I think since we began this effort, specifically looking at the riparian side of things, there's been a lot of interest in making sure to continue to burgeon that discussion. And because none of the other islands, I don't think anybody in the state really has like true riparian buffers or riparian protections or overlays per se. There are some that are in state land use conservation. Of course, that's like our highest apex of protection here in the state, sort of. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work, a lot of interesting work to still be done there. Certainly from watershed perspective as well. The entire island's coastal zone management. Anyway, yeah, I would be open to doing another presentation for our riparian work in the future for sure. Thank you, Tammy, for asking that. Yeah. Anybody else? I guess with the few minutes I got left, I can talk briefly about what we're thinking about, taking what we've learned from Ryan's data is, change rate wise. The other islands use change rates and erosion rates in their shoreline setbacks, but we don't necessarily have really good erosion or change rates. So what we're looking at currently now is sort of a Trinity method. So what we do have are cliffs, and they need a different sort of setback approach. So it'll probably end up being sort of a ratio, like however high that cliff is, you need to be set back at least that same distance, probably a little more, and that'll become your setback for cliffs and bluffs. And then the lower elevation coastlines where flooding is more of a concern. Yes, excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Where flooding is more of a concern, we would rely on the FEMA velocity zones and the coastal high hazard areas. One of the big differences again between us and the other islands is we don't have any wave height modeled. We don't have any wave runup. So the best thing we have is from the 2018 State Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is sort of seen in that top left diagram piece, where they have taken they've modeled the flood zones with 3.2 feet of sea level rise to sort of to bridge that gap where we don't have an actual wave model. And our setbacks would end up on the top right, excuse me. The top right is sort of that overall approach that we're likely going to stick with, which is whichever's greater of those three, that's going to be, what the new coastal setback would be. The state minimum default is 40 feet. And then in the lower elevations, we have the coastal flood hazard area that would be used as a boundary. And then on the areas, higher elevations mostly, where the rise over run becomes a factor, we'd calculate it like that. The bottom right is just a simple diagram of the complexity of how some cliffs morphology is. And on the left, bottom left is also a basic diagram on potential for riparian buffer. It's not the best diagram, but the middle line would sort of be, your top of gulch. And then we'd set back from there. And it may be 40, it may be something even like the 1 to 1.5 slope stability, depending on the steepness of that gulch. So we're still working through a lot of this policy-wise to see what makes sense and where. And of course, data products are still coming in, so it's iterative and still complex, but more to come for sure. Oh, do we have questions in the chat? Okay, yes, come on, I will email you. Yes, sir.
I think Scott has his hand raised.
Okay.
Ryan had done some really great work with Bethany and a grad student in 2016, 2018 on cliff retreat scenarios, short-term, episodic, and really exciting at that point, was completely new for this island. And I wondered, Ryan, if and certainly Kevin, jump in too, if this is better for you, but this notion of cliff retreat and are you, it seems like a whole different world all of a sudden with the work you've done now. I hope that doesn't make that work in 2016 obsolete necessarily, but in another way, I wonder if where you have accurate data in your work of the cliff, are you confident in getting at that episodic fine-grained measurement of retreat, say episodic year to year, every few years? Or are you confident in the technology you've developed now with your team to get at that, where you can get, like you said, the accurate, to say, centimeter data sets?
Yeah, I would say, and there, with, hurricane events and such, there with big rainfall events, there definitely are, coastal cliff failures that occur. We haven't had any, to my knowledge, significant ones of that since we did the big, helicopter flights. But as Rose showed, Rose is a student you're referring to, certainly she was able to pick up through repeat drone flights of that Honolulu little stretch with the house there, measurable changes. So I would say, yeah, where the stars align and it's, basically exposed and we've got good control, and we've got, data that yes, indeed. Now, am I able to an individual pebble that moved down? So where is the minimum signal that we can pick up? I think we're still sort of figuring that out. But certainly, if there's a significant collapse, yeah, it's not an issue to pick that up. And I would say that we actually have an NSF proposal in with Pat Hart for another project. But that does have a LiDAR system as part of it, which could be mounted to a drone or even to a helicopter. And the big difference between the work that we've done and some of the other sort of LiDAR work and such is they're using fixed wing airplanes to do this. And as such, they're not really as nimble as what the helicopter can do, nor can they fly as low or slow. And so that platform, until the FAA allows me to fly, big drones all over the place, but until that happens, the helicopter platform is actually a very powerful one. And so as we continue to improve the imaging, rig, and potentially including LiDAR or just with better cameras or whatever else the case may be, I think we're only going to get better, right? I think that's kind of, I hope that we're not going to get worse. But I think that's the trajectory that we're only going to get better.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, I just think, wow, what now, say if a hurricane lane happened again and how what you learn could project into the future for episodic events. Exciting stuff. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, no, very good.